Thank you for joining us for today's Beyond Words virtual presentation. Today's program is presented by Saratoga Grove and Providence at Home. My name is Renee Ford, and I'm the Community Relations Director for Saratoga Grove, a senior living community here in Downers Grove.
And I'm Katie Martin, and I'm one of the community liaisons for Providence at Home, and we offer in-home care options to seniors in the Chicagoland and Northwest Indiana area. And we're so glad you could all join us today.
Before we turn it over to our speaker, I would like to cover a few housekeeping rules. We invite your comments and questions. At the bottom of your screen, you will see two buttons, one for chat and one for Q&A. If you think of a question for the speakers at any point, you can use either button to type in your question. We will answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. We will be offering one continuing education unit for nurses and social workers to those who attend the entirety of today's presentation. The CE certificate is being underwritten by Silver Connections. Those of you who are attending today will receive an email with an application and evaluation form. Please complete and return both forms to receive your certificate.
And today's presenter is Erica Hornthal, and she's the owner of North Shore Dance Therapy Incorporated. Erica is a clinical psychotherapist and board certified dance movement therapist who is highly sought out by the media to comment on the mind-body connection. Known as a therapist who moves you, she assists clients in making lasting changes by learning to harness the power of body for improved mental health.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to share some tips and tricks and tools. I know that I can't see you all. You can see me and you'll see my presentation, but I do encourage you to use the Q&A and to also, I believe the chat is open. So I'm gonna ask you some things as we go, and I will remind you to put those answers or to give some feedback or comments in the chat so that we can have a little bit of a dialogue, a little bit of a conversation. And if you need anything reworded or just have some questions or confusion around anything that I'm saying, please feel free to ask for some clarity, some clarification. And I will try my best to pay attention to it. And perhaps if I miss something, then one of our three moderators can direct me to it and kind of just let me know. Of course, we'll also have Q&A after the presentation and open it up for questions. So, all right, I'm going to share my screen so you all can see. Okay. You guys should be seeing my slideshow. So let's move from the beginning. There we go. I know you guys are off camera, but can somebody just give me like a thumbs up or a yes that you can see this? Thank you. Okay. All right. So, as was mentioned, this is Beyond Words, using movement to support the therapeutic relationship. My name is Erica Hornthal. I am the CEO of Chicago Dance Therapy, also known as North Shore Dance Therapy Incorporated. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself, and then I want to know who you guys are. And again, that's what we're going to use the chat or the chat box. You can just kind of type in why you're here, what your background is. Are you a counselor, PT, OT, therapist? Maybe you're a caregiver or just a concerned spouse or loved one. But just to give you a little bit of background, again, I'm Erica. I'm a dance movement therapist. I'm also a licensed clinical professional counselor. And the bulk of my work has actually been pretty much solely concentrating on older adults. So I started with an internship well over 15 years ago, worked in adult day programs, nursing homes. I worked for the North Shore Senior Center for many years, mostly in an activity setting, as well as in some case management, but always using the lens of a dance movement therapist. I got my master's in dance movement therapy and counseling from Columbia College, Chicago. And before that, I had a background in psychology and have been dancing my entire life. So I want to know a little bit about who you guys are. So I'm wondering if we can kind of put in the chat. I'm going to open it up here. And just say again, why you guys are here. What is your interest or what is your background? Are you a social worker, counselor, physical therapist? And I'm going to keep talking, but if you guys want to put that in there, that would be great. The last question I have on this slide is, why is this important, right? Why are we doing this? Why is it important to work beyond words? And I think at the heart of it, what I've learned through many, many years of working with my clients is that just because we don't have something or the ability to speak doesn't mean we don't have something to say. And it's really up to us as practitioners, as loved ones, concerned caregivers, that we recognize how that communication is coming out. Oftentimes it comes out as behaviors, but that's really a way that our loved ones or our clients or our residents are trying to speak to us and tell us that they need something. So it starts with us recognizing our own body connection and then translating it into communication of others. Okay, so ideally we're going to identify 2 or more ways to tap into your body knowledge to support and enhance your current skill set, whether that's clinical or otherwise. We're going to name 3 ways to help clients or residents or loved ones, fill in the blank, achieve enhanced self-awareness and emotional processing in treatment through expressive movement. Now, please understand that that does not mean somebody has to have full capacity, cognitively or physically. This is possible for anyone. Through movement, we can achieve really untapped potential. So if you're thinking like, well, my loved one or the person I work with is pretty far in their disease, their dementia, they're chair bound or maybe even bed bound, this still applies. We're also going to list 1 or more ways to strengthen the therapeutic relationship by recognizing, acknowledging, and integrating nonverbal communication more thoughtfully into our daily work and into our daily lives. All right, so let me move this out of the way. We're going to dig right in. The importance of movement in therapy. So movement to me is a form of communication and it's a means of expression. At the heart of it, 93% of our communication is in the body, and only 7% of our communication is the words that we speak and the tone in which we speak it. Everything else comes down to body language, nonverbal communication, and different nuances and characteristics of our embodied language. I like to say that movement isn't just something we do, it's who we are. How we are connected in our bodies comes out in how we communicate, how we relate to others, and how we are in our world. And it's really important to know that all exercise is movement, but not all movement is exercise. So when we implement exercise into our care, into the milieu, into our own lives, it's not enough. Exercise alone is not actually enough to address or to manage emotions. It can certainly help, right? Exercise is really good for physical and emotional expression and well-being. But there's so many more ways that we need to be looking at movement and moving our bodies in order to maximize relationship and mental health. So we're going to talk about setting the stage. There are many things that can support, but also and I should preface this, everything says client, but again, please kind of adapt that word to your own setting. So that might be resident, it might be, again, loved one or caree. It does apply to all. I'm just going to keep referring to it as a client because that is how I use this work with clients. So many things can support or invalidate a client's experience, such as eye contact, pitch, the volume of our voice, our navel orientation, which means the direction in which our torso is facing, and movement with regard to culture. it's really important that we look at all of these things. Sorry, I have a mini light and it keeps going off. So it's distracting me. So I wanted to turn that off so I'm not distracted. So let's look at some of these experiences, right? Eye contact. So you might think, well, how does that invalidate someone's experience? It really has to do with where our gaze is. Are we looking down at someone? Are we looking up at someone? Are we eye level? Are we literally seeing eye to eye, right? Because that's how we build trust. That's how we build rapport and allow somebody to feel safe and comfortable in our presence. Pitch and volume, I think, are self-explanatory, but for us to also consider that matching an individual's volume or pitch is necessary too. This is not my personal story, but I will never forget it. I had a social worker tell me about a nurse that he worked with on one of their hospital units. And there was a gentleman on the unit, very large, like just all around, tall, big guy. And this nurse was really pretty petite and tiny. And he came up to her and just started yelling and was boisterous and loud and like, had his arms like on his hips and making a lot of noise. And he asked her a question and she responded very appropriately, but in the same tone of voice. She kind of like yelled it back to him. Again, same body posture even. And the story goes, the gentleman, the resident or patient said, "Why are you yelling at me?" And she said, "Because you're yelling at me." And now this might not always work, but the patient at the time looked at her and realized, oh, that doesn't feel good, right? And he actually was able to calm and quiet the pitch of his voice, and was able to actually have a conversation. What it was about, I don't know. Again, I wasn't there, but that's not to say that if a client or a resident is yelling at us that we should yell back at them, but it's really about noticing the pitch and the volume of the voice in which we're being talked to and trying to match that, right? If somebody is loud and upset and you're like, okay, it's going to be fine. Like, we want to be grounding, we want to be calming to them, but we also want to validate their experience. Navel orientation, as I mentioned, it's literally the way that you're sitting. So if you're facing forward, your head is looking at the person, but your body language is directed elsewhere, that's actually where your attention is drawn. And so when we're present to someone, when we're really paying attention to them or want to give them our full focus, we want to make sure that our belly button is facing them. And then also looking at movement with regard to culture. I'm not going to go into all the details, but it's really important that we think about the culture and the background of our client so that we know how movement shows up. Certain hand gestures mean other things in other languages. I remember learning that if you sit with your leg crossed and your foot is aimed at the person across from you in certain cultures, that's disrespectful. So it's really about understanding how our movement plays out with regard to our client's culture. Things we want to consider are elements like space, touch, gesture, and posture. And is your nonverbal communication supporting your client? Are you showing up really stressed out, tense, and tight, thinking you're managing your stress, but having it manifest in your body? That energy comes across to our clients, and especially for people who are nonverbal or losing their ability to communicate verbally, they pick up on it. I never infantilize my clients, but I think it's very important to understand that when our clients, especially older adults who may be experiencing cognitive decline, they start to go back to those primitive ways of communication that can often mirror what we see in our children, what we see in infants or toddlers or maybe even adolescents. And that's not to say that that's where they are, right? They're still 85, 90-year-old, 100-year-old people with lots of wisdom and experience. But from a body perspective and a communication standpoint, we need to make sure that we're validating that experience and that we are supporting them as much as we can through our nonverbal communication as well as theirs. Okay, no questions so far. So we're going to, let me see, Q&A? No, so we're going to keep going. All right, so the first thing that I want to touch on is something called empathic reflection. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Most of us, I'm guessing, understand the word empathy or have heard it before. Reflection like a mirror, right? We want to reflect empathy. When you are aware of your own body, you can use it as a tool for reflection and deeper empathy with your own clients, residents, or otherwise. So it's about really starting to understand how things play out in our body so that it helps the people across from us, doesn't hinder them. It's also about sharpening your listening skills. So you may have heard about something called active listening. This is about embodied listening. We're listening from all the parts of our bodies. As a dance movement therapist, I like to say that I don't just listen with my ears, I listen with my body. And sometimes that's my pinky toe, sometimes that's my ear. Crazy as it sounds, it's about really paying attention to what I feel in my body and noticing what I see in theirs. So something I like to also point out is, instead of saying what I hear you saying, we might want to say what I feel you saying. That's a pretty typical therapy statement. So what I hear you saying is, you might not use that language per se, but instead of what you're hearing someone say, consider what you feel. What I feel you saying is you're really upset, or what I feel you looking for is comfort, safety, a hug, versus I hear you're scared. I hear you want to go home. I hear you're missing your wife. It also does come down to language, even though it's a small percentage of our communication. There are ways that we can use our language to support the bodied or embodied experience. So we can ask ourselves, or we can ask our clients or their family members, like anytime we're trying to work with someone or trying to build a rapport, we can say, like, what do you notice in your body? What do you feel? Where do you feel it in your body? You know, somebody says, I'm in pain. Instead of just saying where, maybe say, where do you feel that in your body? How does that feel in your body? We want to pay attention, right? Pay attention to sensations in your body. Take a moment to check in with your body. How does that impact your body? Things like, let's connect to our breath. Let's take a breath. Can we breathe together? Also things like, what does your body need, right? We're pretty used to asking people, I think, what do you need? Instead of asking, what does your body need? You know, because there's a lot there. Sometimes when we say body, we think, oh, hungry, tired, right? But our bodies can look for safety, comfort, a hug, a gentle pat on the back, a touch, creativity, expression, music. You just never know. And the experiences I've had with my older adult clients have been some of the most creative ones, because they're open to the possibilities of creativity. As we get older, creativity actually increases, but we have to provide the space for that to happen. And so just thinking out of the box and asking our people in different ways of how they're feeling or experiencing something is really important. Again, this is suggesting that people can process some of this verbally or still access that verbal communication. So using movement in, I put your session, but for some of you, it may be an activity. It may be a workshop, maybe it's a meeting, or maybe it is a session, whether it's PT, OT, a patient visit, right? So again, kind of use that word session with a grain of salt, but it is applicable across situations. So for me, using movement in a session can be the difference between moving on and moving through. I love to say that we need to feel through something so we can think our way out of it. We cannot always think our way out of things unless or until we've felt through them. And so we say, like, we want to move on, but what we really need to do is move through. We need to move through the grief, the fear, the behaviors, the anxiety, the tension. And so in terms of like working with a client or a patient, or even a family, right? Because they're the client sometimes. We want to make them happy. We want them to think that their person is getting the best care possible. Using movement can actually mean the difference between termination and determination. So I realize termination kind of comes up pretty much in like a therapy setting. But again, if you're a social worker working at a building and really trying to work with family members, termination might not be the right term, but families can certainly leave. They can move on. They can try to find, another place for their loved one. And so in a sense, that becomes termination, right? We really want to find determination. We want to work together and find a way to work as one. I'm just going to check the time because I can't see it on my computer. So, okay, we're good. So it's important because movement in a session or in an activity is important because tuning into your body allows you to become more present to your client's needs. Increasing your body awareness actually reduces burnout. And I don't know about you all, but this is the next pandemic, is just existential exhaustion, pandemic burnout. We're go, go, go. We're always on the computer. We're Zooming. And it's perpetuating a mind-body disconnect. So we really, really need to take the time to become aware of our bodies to reduce that burnout. It helps because paying attention to your body supports your own self-regulation, emotionally and physically. Practicing something called bodyfulness, which is actually it's a title of a book, but it was also a word coined by a dance therapist whose name is Christine Caldwell. It's kind of the next step to mindfulness, right? It's practicing mindfulness in the entire body. It enhances your own resilience. When we're in our bodies and when we're better able to identify how we feel in our body, it actually helps us bounce back from things, which is the definition of resilience. And it's important because it models for our clients to support their own growth. And again, it doesn't matter if somebody's 98, in the advanced stages of dementia, we still want to be a good model for our residents and for our patients or our clients, because I really believe that some sense of growth and certainly quality of life is possible until we take our last breath. All right, so some of this may be applicable directly to you, and some of it, again, just kind of work with your own situation. And if you have questions or need clarification, please don't hesitate to ask. So we're going to talk about some techniques, how to do this in a pre-session, during a session, and a post-session. Again, session could be meeting, it could be doctor visit, consultation, it could be an activity, right? Any activity really. So this is actually directly from a workbook that I created, which is why it looks a little different. But I thought it would be helpful to visualize instead of just having me talk about it. So pre-session, that would be before you meet the family, before you do your exercise with your group of seniors, before you meet your client for physical therapy or occupational therapy. It's vital that you ground and center yourself before the session, whatever that is, in order to identify what you somatically bring into the room, what you're bringing into the room in your body. What do people usually say? Leave that at the door. Don't bring it into the office. That's really not possible. You might be able to not think about it, like leave it at the door and then pick that thought back up when you get home, but your body doesn't detach from things so easily. So you're really bringing it with you wherever you go. This is needed to connect yourself to the present moment so that you can truly be aware of what your client needs and how to best help them. So things that we can do are place our feet firmly on the ground while standing or sitting and lengthen through our spine. So you might want to try this now, just however you're attending this webinar. If you're laying down, adjust yourself. If you're sitting, but your feet are, underneath you, or you're sitting cross-legged, put your feet underneath you and really feel your feet on the floor. And just lengthen a bit through your spine, creating a bit of a lift in your posture. So this might be, chin raising or chest opening. It's not about having good posture. It's not about looking a certain way. It's just finding some length in that spine. We want to practice breath for self-regulation. And ideally, we want to breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. And we should really focus on the exhale because that engages the diaphragm, which is how we enhance that rest and digest reflex. So if you notice, most of us breathe from our chests. right? It's very shallow and does not let a lot of emotional flow through the body. But if you draw your attention to your belly, your chest actually doesn't move at all, but you have a much more grounded, centered connection and attachment to your breath. And that's when breath can really help us regulate our own emotions as well as be present to others. We also want to draw our attention to any bodily felt sensations. So just notice any tension, right? Like, oh, my neck, like right now, I need to stretch my neck a little bit. Maybe roll out our shoulders. Just notice how you feel now, because when we check out, check back in, I should say, at the end of a session, we're going to want to make sure, we're going to want to see the difference, or we're going to want to notice what we brought with us, what we left with us, or sometimes what we even attached from our clients, or brought, I guess, from our clients. So that's pre-session. Hopefully that makes sense. It's weird when I can't see you guys. I've done it many times, but it's so strange when it's a webinar, right? And I'm just kind of talking to myself, even though I know you're there. Okay, so now we have during the session. It's really important to check in with your body during the session in order to practice that deep listening, that empathic reflection, to be present to yourself, to your client, and to acknowledge what we call countertransference, which would be basically acknowledging if something is mine versus someone else's, right? Like, I'm feeling really anxious, but is it my anxiety, or am I feeling my client's anxiety? Or am I feeling anxiety in response to something that my client said, and it is mine, but I have to learn how to regulate this and really manage it for myself and not let it influence our relationship, so to speak. So some ways to do this: always keep a drink handy. Practice mindfully taking a sip just to stay present in your body. Bring a water bottle with you or have your coffee. And instead of waiting until the session is over to grab that cup of coffee or to get that drink of water, practice doing it in between, right? It's actually really good physically too. We know it hydrates us, but water keeps everything in our system flowing and moving. Change or shift your posture to change your perspective, so not just to move our bodies, but literally when we shift our body, we bring in new perspectives. That's the hard thing about sitting on Zoom. We're really staring at the same thing all the time. It's the problem with our phones. Our perspectives are so limited. They've become 7-inch screens instead of the world around us. So we really, really need to hone in on the big picture. Encourage your own grounding during a session by putting your feet on the floor. So depending on how you're sitting, where you're sitting or standing, not just shifting our posture, but really putting our feet down, which I'm going to do right now, and making sure that we're connected to our environment and to ourselves. And then lastly, we have a post-session check-in. So again, we want to draw our attention to any felt bodily sensations. Notice how they've changed or shifted between pre and post. Take inventory of what's yours and what you may have acquired from your client or your patient. And sometimes that sounds a little woo-woo, a little froofy, like exchange of energy, but there are studies that show it actually happens. So, for me to say, oh, my client had a headache and now I do, that's not really what I'm suggesting. It's more the energy in the room, right? My client was tense and tight, and I was feeling pretty good until I met that person. And now I'm feeling tense and tight too. It's kind of the same way if you've ever met someone, like just met them and already they rub you the wrong way, right? It's oftentimes not that person, it's the association we have with them. They remind us of someone, and we've already judged them before we really get to know them. That's kind of what I'm talking about. Are you associating something? Are you taking on something from this client that wasn't there to begin with? And finally, we want to find a way to unpack or express what's not ours. So if after a session you're feeling drained, tired, overwhelmed, anxious, exhausted, you name it, right? It's really important that you find a way to express that. And so that could be, maybe it's exercise, maybe it's listening to music, singing in the car, journaling, writing. I always keep a notepad and a pen with me. Well, I'm at my home office, but I love to doodle. So, you know, as long as it's not a distraction, right, through a session, if it allows me, I have a pen and paper handy, and I just keep my hand moving. It really does a lot to dispel any built up tension that I might not even be aware of. And keep in mind that art does not have to be for a product. It's all about the process. So, you know, creating art doesn't have to look like anything. It's just the process of release, right? Emotional release. All right, so here's a little movement checklist, something that you can do with your residents, clients. Again, they may need to be adapted, or yourself, or you can even have a little movement checklist to give to new families, you know, to give to family members that maybe are just going through this, or their dad's just been diagnosed with dementia, or the Alzheimer's has progressed, you know, incredibly, and it's really taking a toll on everyone. Movement is important for everyone to process emotions. So we want to have a checklist of things that we can either offer ourselves or them. So one would be invite the client, or again, family member, spouse, etc., to bring attention to their body. You know, just give them the opportunity to do that for themselves. Like, what am I feeling in my body right now? How is it feeling? What do I need? We want to create space. I can't talk. Create space to breathe into difficult emotions, right? That can be environmental space, you know, like I just need a break. I need to get away. I need to step outside. Space is kind of a loaded topic when it comes to the pandemic, because we're all taking space or trying to create space in a little different of a capacity, right? But when we create space in our environment and in our bodies, it actually creates the space for us to process really difficult emotions in our minds. Take stretch breaks. We don't do that enough. We kind of reserve it to the gym, or I don't know, just when we're feeling so exhausted, we let out this huge yawn and we just kind of stretch out of nowhere. But if we stretch throughout the day, you know, and we can try this right now, like just stretching your, see, I'm already going to yawn. Just stretching your arms over your head. Oh, excuse me, guys. I have a 1-year-old, so I get up early. What can I say? You know, just notice how it feels. Like just stretching your body, just moving your body in a way that maybe you didn't even know that you needed. I wrote incorporating new phrases. So the ones that I mentioned earlier, like how does your body feel? Where do you feel it in your body? Connect to your breath. These are things that we can continue to check in with, right? Like make sure that we've used them, or ask ourselves, would this be helpful in this moment? Check in with your own body as a practitioner or professional, you know, just allowing yourself, like those stretch breaks, just I leave a little Post-it note where I know I'm going to be most of the day, or some type of reminder that tells me, check in. I wonder if I still have it here. I'm running out of them, but I had these stickers made up. It says head, shoulders, knees, and toes, your body knows. And I used to give them to my clients or family members or professionals to put somewhere, like a notebook, the back of their phone, somewhere in their car, so that every time they saw it, it was a reminder that they needed to move their body. You know, we learn head, shoulders, knees, and toes when we were kids, and then we forget, right? Or we're too old for that. We don't need that anymore. But there's a reason we learned it. It wasn't just to learn our body parts. Again, shift your posture and ground and center yourself for your client. So again, where we put our feet, where our navel is oriented, are all things that are going to help us move throughout the day to reduce stress and to enhance the therapeutic relationship. So we're going to go into some interventions. Good. And I also want to leave probably a good at least 10 minutes for Q&A. I want to talk about some interventions and things that you may be able to do for yourself, or again, in a group, or for a spouse or family member. But I do like to set some rules and guidelines around them first. So first and foremost, you don't want to use an intervention if you haven't tried it. So we may get to try some of them, but because our time is limited, if you don't feel like you've actually tried these yourself, you might want to try them at some point so that you know how it feels, and you can guide your clients through them as well, and also account for any variation or variables or accommodations that need to be made. We don't want to assign meaning to any movement. That's for you to do for yourself or for your clients to do for themselves, right? So it's tricky because, let's see, I happen to have the book right here. Body language. So this is Joe Navarro's book. It's the Dictionary of Body Language, a field guide to human behavior. I have it, one, because I think it's interesting, but it's a reminder to me that body language, while there are experts in the field, we're all our own experts in how we feel in our bodies. So just because you move a certain way or you hold yourself a certain way, it's not my job to assume that you're feeling a certain thing. Body language experts love to watch like murder trials or really intense interviews and scrutinize and kind of analyze what that person's really saying. They can look for things like contempt, sadness, manipulation. That's not what we're doing here. We are learning to be experts in our own body communication and our own body wisdom. And so it's really important that we open ourselves up to what our movement means and not quickly judge or assign meaning to any movement. Lastly, we want to ask permission. So if you're ever going to do these interventions or try these with, again, whoever you want to try them with, it's really important that we ask for permission. I'd like to try this with you. What do you think? I'd like to incorporate some movement. How would you feel about that? And if somebody can't answer or you can't, get verbal recognition, then it's really important that we acknowledge what's happening in their body. Do they look open to an experience like this? Where are they right now in their world, and how open will they be to movement? So an example that I love to give, I was facilitating a movement therapy group at a nursing home, and I would say the individuals were moderate to some were late stage Alzheimer's. And a new physical therapist came into our group. Actually, she kind of interrupted me while we had some music going, and I was, moving my body, and without excusing or kind of pardoning the interruption, she said, "I'm looking for so-and-so." And the person she was looking for was actually new to me. So I thought I knew who it was, but it wasn't 100%. And she was like, "I'm looking for Joan." Like, I think that's Joan. Well, Joan happened to be the woman that was sleeping. She was in the circle. She was in our group, but her eyes were closed. And this PT, lovely girl, I mean, she really meant well, but just didn't approach the situation in the best manner. Goes up to Joan, kind of shakes her, taps her, and is like, "Joan, I need you to take a walk." And Joan kind of opens her eyes a little bit and looks at her, and she's like, "What?" She's like, "Joan, I need you to take a walk with me. Do you want to take a walk?" And she opens her eyes and she says, "I don't want to take a walk. You take a walk." And then closed her eyes again. And we all I'm looking at activity staff, they're looking at me, other residents are looking at us, and we kind of look and try to hide our humor. It was funny, but we were trying to be really compassionate toward the physical therapist because she wasn't getting anywhere with this resident. So she kind of looks at me and she's like, "I'll try again later." So I'm like, okay. Well, needless to say, Joan woke up and was the most engaged participant for the rest of our group because we met her where she was. We didn't force an agenda. We didn't ask her to do something she wasn't aware of. She woke up on her own time, found the energy of the group, if you will, and found her own way to participate. And so my story, the point of my story is that, like Teepa Snow says, we don't want to push our own agenda, but we want to meet people where they are, right? And I thought, well, if only that physical therapist had just sat down next to Joan and kind of just joined in the activity and then slowly eased into what she needed Joan to do, she very easily could have gotten Joan to take a walk, but it was how she approached it. So That's not necessarily a rule or a guideline, but I just wanted to give you an example of kind of other ways that we can approach things to get our clients to do what we want them to do, or what we know they need to do. All right, so right on time. I'm going to talk about a few interventions, and these are not dance therapy specific. You don't have to be a therapist to do these, which is why I talk about them. But again, I think it's in your best interest to try them out. If you get to now, or if you've never done them at some point, try to do them. So the first one I love to impart is actually movement to music, but that looks a lot of different ways, right? So rather than an exercise routine or a dance group or dance class, just put on some music. And ideally, you want to use music that either supports the current tone or attempts to enhance it, right? So if you walk into a room and everybody's sleeping, it's actually counterproductive to start playing, I don't know, Cool in the Gang or Celebration or Want to Be Starting Something or Let's Party. Even though we want the energy to be there, we have to meet people where they are first. So like one of my magic songs is always My Girl. I love to play Motown or doo-wop, big bands, but something that really matches the mood, the intensity, or the tone of the room in which we're in, or the emotion that the person is conveying. And then we can kind of modulate it. And so we just use some music to introduce movement. You don't even have to tell somebody how to move. Just start playing music and notice the movement that happens, and then start calling it out. Oh, look, Mr. Smith's tapping his feet. Let's try tapping our feet. Hey, Joan is rolling her arms. Can we try rolling our arms, right? For you as a burnout, as a way to avoid burnout, just put some music on in your car, put some music on in your house, and not even with the intention of having a dance party, but just, sorry, I'm gonna stop sharing. Well, I'll leave it. Let's see. I'm stopping myself for a moment because there are references. I just wanted to put up contact information because then actually I'm gonna stop screen sharing so that you can just see my face. So real quickly, if you want to contact me, here's my email. Here's some websites that you can find me on. I'm also on Instagram as The Therapist Who Moves You, and Facebook as Erica Hornthal. So I encourage you to reach out if you have questions or you want to have a conversation. I love to connect with people. So I'm going to stop my screen share. Hopefully that was enough for you guys to take a screenshot or write that down. And now you can see me. Okay. So music for movement. So just start to implement or use some music to start noticing or moving your own body. And if it turns into a dance party, fabulous. But that is not the point. It's really just about using music to support movement in all aspects, in all forms. So that's one very simple, one intervention that you can use in a lot of different ways. Another way to do that is to actually draw to movement. So if you want to incorporate movement into whatever activity or session you may be having, and the person seems really hesitant or unsure or tight, or uptight, you can use music and then ask the person to take a pen or a pencil, find a piece of paper, right? And again, it can be a huge piece of paper if they need it. It can be a big marker, or it can just be like a little pad and paper. And you just ask them to start to move to the rhythm of the music. And, just it actually gets them moving, right? Because your hand is moving. So they may think that they're drawing or, may look like artwork, but it's actually just a way to get your hand moving, which gets your arm moving, which gets all the connections in your brain firing. So it's it's a way in. So we've got music for movement, drawing to music, obviously interventions directed towards breath, taking a deep breath or breathing together. Anytime you can use props, that are age appropriate, but I love to use like stretch bands, something called the Octaband, which is kind of like an octopus looking thing. It's just a bunch of stretch bands connected in the center. So everyone has, here, I'll draw a little picture. This is my picture. It pretty much looks like a sun, right? So there's a little piece of elastic material in the center, and then it reaches out to all the participants. So it's independent movement connected in the center, which is really nice. It gives a sense of community while people are independently moving. So a prop like that. Balloons, I think, are totally underutilized, but I love to just take a plain old balloon, blow it up, no helium needed, and to actually just put it in the center of the room and have, if possible, residents just tap it, bop it, send it across the room. Some of the most unexpected people are the biggest participants. And it may take a few times to try. I've had individuals who, are very tired, very lethargic, really, you just think they're not going to participate. And then just inviting in a very gentle manner, the possibility of the lightness and the gentleness of the balloon, man, it really changes the whole demeanor. And then all of a sudden you might have a really engaged group. And it's bringing them into different dimensions, into different planes of movement, right? They're suddenly moving forward. It can really direct attention because we're poking, we're tapping. It can even bring a little bit of confrontation in a good way, right? A little bit of healthy competition. Yeah, I could go on and on. I definitely have a lot of interventions kind of in my head. But I'm going to also do a little bit of movement with you all right now. Perfect. We have a few minutes and then I'll open it up for questions. So I'm going to invite you to put your feet again on the floor and lift your body. And we're going to move in 3 different dimensions. And I do these at the beginning and end of all of my sessions, whether it's an individual or it's a group. We take our arms and we reach up into the space above us. And then we take our arms and we reach into the space below us. Good, so keep in mind, it may look like this. It can look like this. Maybe it looks like this. It really depends on the person's capacity and physical capability. But we're gonna do what we can and we're just gonna give them permission to do what they can. Okay, so vertical. We're gonna move into the horizontal, give ourselves a nice big hug, and then open our arms out nice and wide. Again, post-COVID, this would be give yourself a hug and reach out and grab the person next to you, right? Nowadays, we pretend we're reaching out to the people next to us, but either way. And then lastly, we're gonna move into the space in front of us, like Superman, and we're gonna reach, and then we're gonna slowly come back. Okay? And again, we're gonna reach into the space in front of us and pull our arms back. Very simple. Why do I do this? Moving in the vertical plane taps into self, core belief system, identity, values, morals. Reaching into the horizontal connects us to other, takes who we are, how we feel, safe and secure in ourselves, and extends or outreaches or opens up to the people around us. And when we move in the sagittal, this forward and back plane, it's about advancing into our environment, taking action, being the change we want to see, having meaning, purpose, quality of life, which is very important for all of us, regardless of how old we are or what cognitive disabilities we may be faced with. So I think that is what I mostly wanted to share with you all. It's about 5:20-ish. And I just wanted to give an opportunity to open up Q&A. Also bring back in our moderators if they have questions or any information that they need to give you all before we end. But I definitely am leaving time for feedback and questions, and please, please, please feel free to put those in the Q&A box now.
Thank you, Erica, for this very warm presentation. Yeah, it was absolutely wonderful. As a reminder, if you have a question that you have not yet submitted, please enter it in the Q&A or chat box, and we will get through as many questions as time allows. Before we start the Q&A portion of our presentation, we'd like to tell you a little bit about our two organizations. As I mentioned at the start of this presentation, Saratoga Grove is a Providence Life Services community. Providence has been offering senior living options in Indiana, Illinois, and Michigan for over a century. Saratoga Grove has been offering senior living options here in Downers Grove since 1989 and works with Providence Health Care and Rehabilitation Center to offer skilled nursing services right on our own campus.
And our team at Providence at Home is proud to offer both home health, private duty, palliative, and hospice services to clients throughout Chicagoland and Northwest Indiana. We're both Medicare certified and Joint Commission accredited, and we're established in 1994. So we bring over 25 years of experience to our clients that we serve. So it's a little bit difficult to me to see if there's questions that are submitted because I'm on my phone instead of my laptop. So I might need some help if there's some questions to facilitate. But let's get started with the Q&A portion.
I don't see any yet, but I'm hoping that they will come in. I have it open, so.
Okay, good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I did have 2 questions. If I could jump in, Katie, do you mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, just 2 questions. Where do you buy an Octoband? And do you go into communities and like, can communities hire you to work with their residents in like a group setting? So just those 2. And just,
So,
yeah.
Yeah, so I think your best bet would actually, I should have checked that ahead of time. But I think it's actually octoband.com. You can also buy it on Amazon. It's OCTOBAND, Octoband. Let me just see if it's not my company. I wish I had thought of it, but a dance therapist and a really good friend of mine is the owner. So I'm sorry, it's on Amazon.com or it's at danceforconnection.com. And it's OCTABAND, Octoband. And they come in 8, 16, and I think 32. And I don't know, she's like really cool colors, beautiful fabrics. I have one and I've used it probably for 10 years. And I think it's great. I actually used it in my daughter's class. I've used it with adolescents. I've used it in eating disorders and most definitely used it with my seniors. And it's great because it has a loop at the end. So if somebody can't hold on to it, you can put it on them. You can loop it onto their arm, or we've tied it to wheelchairs. We've tied it to poles. So there's lots of ways that you can use it creatively. As far as my work, yes, I love to work with facilities. I go in and do groups. I can work one-on-one. I actually go into people's homes, although I'm not doing that right now. But I'm even doing some of it on telehealth. So I've done a lot of like memory cafes, virtual groups. When possible, I understand that it takes a little bit of a higher cognitively functioning individual to engage in that. But if somebody is a little bit more moderate in whatever their illness is, or their disease process looks like, if a caregiver or a family member is able to be present, then I can help facilitate it between the two of them. Rates, if anybody's interested, kind of depend on budget. I'm very flexible with budget. I will say that like hour-long groups usually start at around $100 and then adjust based on budget and financial need. I think those were the 2 questions that you asked. I see another question. Have you ever provided this type of service to veterans? And if so, were they receptive? So dance therapy with veterans, there's actually quite a bit of research there. And while I have not facilitated a group intentionally for veterans, there have been many, many veterans in my groups, and they have been very receptive. I urge you to check out the oh my God, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but national centers, it's associated with the White House, with the government. There are wonderful resources actually for dance movement therapy with veterans, because there have been lots of grants given. And it was several years ago now, but I remember there was an image like front and center of a dance therapist that I don't think I've ever worked with her. We've spoken many times, but there was a picture of her in the room with Barack Obama. And he was actually, it wasn't a dance therapy group per se. It was, I think they were actually doing some yoga, but it was facilitated by a dance therapist. And it was in Washington, D.C. It was actually, it was a good moment for all of us. We were very excited that dance therapy was being represented. There's a lot of work being done in Chicagoland with veterans per se. And yeah, they're very receptive, because to be honest, they've experienced so much, and it can be very difficult for them to talk about or even want to talk about what they've experienced. But when you move, it naturally comes out in the body, and it's really helpful to have somebody that can help support and validate what comes out when movement happens. So hopefully that answers your question. And if you have need any clarification, you can let me know. Any other questions, or I don't know, do you guys have any questions? I'm happy to answer anything.
Yeah, we have about 2 minutes left, and I just wanted to share that I really appreciated the story about Joan and the PT person, and just how important it is to be present and just meeting people where they're at, because so often working for myself in the healthcare industry, I just get so busy and just want to move things along, and that's not how to relate to people. So
yeah, and it stuck with me. It really did, because I thought, instead of pushing an agenda, if she had just said, or like come up to me and said, like, I really need to work with this person, can you help me? Or not even like, just, hey, look, there's an activity going on. Ooh, I'll pull up a chair. It wouldn't have actually derailed. It would have actually taken less time than it did in the confrontation and the conflict.
Yeah.
And then she had to walk away, and she didn't even get the opportunity to work with Joan. So it was like, oh, I really could have helped facilitate that, and I'm sorry that you didn't ask for it. But people see dance or movement or exercise, and they're like, oh, it's an activity. No, it's actually a lot more than that. And we have to expand our minds and just open our eyes to what is possible, not just what we think we see.
Well, thank you. Perfect ending, and it's 5:30, so I will end here and just thank you for the work you do and bringing it out there for all of us, and also thank you to everyone who joined us for today's webinar. Erica, and again, thank you for sharing your insight and expertise. And just a reminder, if you are wishing to receive the continuing education credit, to keep an eye out for the application and evaluation that will be emailed to you. If you have any additional questions, you can reach out to myself or Katie, and we will connect you to the right person. And on behalf of all of us at Saratoga Grove and Downers Grove and Providence at Home, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Have a good evening.